All right, hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like you got your box lunches. See, something different than pizza. How many of you went to yesterday's career panel? That's great. So you learned all about jobs in international business and trade, and you got to see all these people that are raking in a lot of money and traveling the world. Today, you're going to hear about the people who have the coolest jobs ever. And when you leave here, if you don't leave thinking that, you can have your money back, because I guarantee you that that's what you're going to think. This is a great group of alums who are doing really cool things. So today is the Public International Law Career Panel. And we have a strength here at the law school in public international law. A lot of people start their careers in internships. And how many of you guys went to the internship panel? So a lot of you. Okay, if you didn't, we'll tell you more about internships as well. They'll probably tell you about the internships that started their careers. And then people in this field don't just go straight. People bounce around. And so you're going to hear a theme that a lot of these folks have had more than one job, and they kind of build on each other, and it propels their career forward. And that's something you'll want to think about. The jobs aren't all in the public interest area. You're going to hear some of them did private international law, working at law firms, and then switched back and forth. So you're going to hear a lot about that. I think this is going to be a really useful panel for you, and it should encourage you to try out for or to apply for those internships and think about a career in this field. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce everybody. Actually, I'm going to let you hear their voices. So I'll start from the end with Eliza and have each of you just say what your name is and where you're currently working.
Baker. I'm an attorney advisor for the Department of Justice Executive Office of Immigration Review at the Cleveland Immigration Court.
All right, so already that sounds really cool, right? Caitlin?
Hi, I'm Caitlin Masetta Alvarez. I am a trial attorney at the Department of Justice Office of Immigration Litigation.
And you do both trial and appeals, right?
I do trial, appellate work, and I help get briefs up to the Supreme Court of the United States.
All right, Phil.
Hi, I'm Philip Haji. I'm a judge on the U.S. Court of Federal Claims.
And he stumbled because he's newly
Yes.
appointed to that. It's a really exciting
That's
thing.
where I work.
I got to speak at his induction. It was really exciting down in DC. And before that, Phil, where did you work?
So I spent about 12 years before that as an attorney in the U.S. Department of the Navy Office of the General Counsel. So I was a civilian attorney working for the General Counsel.
But very international, right? Okay, the next is Haider Said.
Hello, everyone. I'm Haider Sayed. I currently practice international civil service law before the International Labor Organization Administrative Tribunal. And before that, I was working for Interpol, which is an international organization based in Lyon, France.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Pang McCloskey, and I am an attorney advisor at the State Department. And I advise the visa office in the Bureau of Consular Affairs.
The job I had that really launched my career was attorney advisor at the U.S. State Department. So Erin was one of my mentees, and I was excited to see her follow in my footsteps. So the last guy you see, we all gave each other a note that this is supposed to be casual today. We're going from here to an experts meeting across the way on the need for a new Geneva Conventions, and we're going to create the Cleveland report on that. And the instructions was everybody's supposed to be casual, but Chris Rossi is also our dinner speaker, so he didn't get to go casual.
Chris? Casual as I get. Chris Rossi, I'm Chief of Staff at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in Geneva. 4 years.
All right, now Chris is a great example of someone who's had a lot of jobs in their career. Chris, starting with your internship in law school, just walk us through all the different jobs you've had.
Okay. So after my first year of law school, I interned in Geneva. That was my first time living in Geneva at the International Trade Center, which is a joint UN WTO agency.
Just to stop you there, that is one of our permanent placements, so you guys should think about applying there to launch Chris. Okay, next.
So I was the first one to ever intern there.
Second one.
Yeah. Look at that. She was never there. I actually did go there. That would have been fun.
And well, I got it just by, I was just sending letters to international organizations saying that may or may not have had an internship program, and they had one, but that wasn't very, I mean, this is also a long time ago, before you could find internship programs on our websites. And so that's how I started there. And I actually stayed on as a bit of a consultant with them for starting when I was in MBA after, and so I enjoyed that very much. And that was trade. So that was, I thought at that point I wanted to be a trade lawyer, and I was a trade lawyer for a period after, but I'll get to that. Then I came back after my second summer. I went to a law firm here in Cleveland. I was told you should do. That it was told them that. And that was good. And I did spend about 5 years in private practice with that law firm after. But I took a break after law school, and I didn't want to go straight to the law firm. So I asked for a year deferral, and I did some non-traditional clerkships. I clerked at the Constitutional Court of South Africa as a foreign law clerk, and I did a internship at the International Criminal Tribunal, both for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda in The Hague. And then after that, I went back to the firm for a couple of years, and then missed what I was doing before. So managed to get a position, a lawyer position at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in Arusha, Tanzania, where I stayed for a couple more years. And then I came back to private practice as a trade lawyer in DC, back with the firm, and did 3 more years with them because they were I found them very generous, and they were great, and they let me go and at that point and take a leave of absence, and also supported me during the bar process and everything. So I came back to the firm. And then I had to decide at that point, that takes us to about 2010, am I going on the private practice path, or am I going back to more of an international organization, public international law path? And I chose to go back to the UN at that point, and I haven't looked back since. But and then I went to the Special Tribunal for Lebanon in The Hague, where I stayed for between 2.5 years. And then I decided.
As an aside, who did you get to know there that's like super famous now?
You always ask me that question.
I love it.
And it can't be the most interesting thing in life.
It is.
So, I'll get to that later. Maybe.
Okay.
And then I started to get a bit tired working on one case at a time in international criminal law, because I was working on these judgments. At that point, I was a prosecutor, as a legal advisor to the prosecutor. And I was you were just working on one matter for multiple years. And I didn't see myself doing that forever. So I decided I wanted to work in the general counsel's office for the international organization. I thought that would be interesting and get to learn the operation. So I moved then to the IFRC in Geneva, in the general counsel's office, where I've been on October 1st will be 12 years. Now, I've had 6 different jobs since I've been there, but I've had 12 years with the organization.
All right, and Aaron, you've got this dream job at the State Department, but you had some other really cool jobs too. Tell us about those.
Well, I also had internships in law school. Also did, just paving the way. I was at the International Trade Center in Geneva, my first summer after law school, and then my second summer I was in London at the International Bar Association. My first job out of law school, I worked as a trial attorney for ICE. Did not last in that job for very long. I didn't love that job very much, to be quite honest. And then I always thought trade would be interesting, and so I also practiced trade law for over 4 years at the Department of Commerce in the Office of General Counsel there. And then after that, I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to a different kind of immigration practice. And so I went to the Administrative Appeals Office of USCIS, which is within DHS. And then I found my way over to the State Department over 3 years ago. And now I lead a team of 10 attorneys who advise the Bureau of Consular Affairs. And if any of you have a passport or have ever received a visa or have ever gotten into trouble overseas, call for citizen services. Those are the 3 main areas that our client on. So even though I do specialize in visas, sometimes I do get pulled into some pretty interesting other areas.
Right, and Hyder, you've had a couple of really interesting jobs too.
So after my first year of law school, I was at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, not with Amal Clooney, but with someone even better, Chris Rossi. And he was my boss at that time, and now he's the chief of staff to the IFRC. I like to think I played a role in his development. Because he did such a good job with me that they said, you know what, we're just gonna make you chief of staff of the international organization.
And I should say, when Hyder was here, he was our absolute star at Jessup. They even have a nickname that people still refer to behind his back, Hyderpedia, because he knew so much international law. Sorry.
No worries.
You
So,
didn't know
I
that.
mean, after that first summer with working under Chris, and then the following summer, I was clerking for the UN Human Rights Committee in Geneva. And then after I took the bar exam, I went to Interpol for a few months on a postgraduate fellowship. After that, I joined the U.S. Agency for International Development in Washington. I was there for a few years. They then seconded me for some reason to Interpol in Lyon, where I'd been before. But there's not so much overlap between USAID and Interpol. So luckily, that's something that just happened to work out in my case. I was there then as a seconded official, and then returned to Washington, and then immediately applied for something else at Interpol, and then I was back there for a few years. And now doing something on my own, international civil service law. So it's when an employee, a staff member of an international organization has a dispute with the international organization over an employment matter, because international organizations are generally immune from, the jurisdiction of domestic courts and tribunals, there are specialized tribunals that have jurisdiction. So that's the work that I do now.
Way cool. So, Judge, you did a lot of different things when you were at the Navy. Tell us about some of those jobs.
Sure. So I've been on this panel a few times, and I always think that I have the least international of the international jobs here, but I did touch on international law, working for the Navy to some respect. So I focus mostly on government contracts for the Navy. And as you can all imagine, the Navy operates around the world, has bases everywhere. So I think the most internationally focused part of my job had to do with Navy operations in foreign bases, which often fall under something known as a status of forces agreement, which is essentially like a treaty between the military in the United States and the foreign country that's hosting the military, the host nation. So when the Navy is operating in that environment, there is a pretty significant aspect of international law, and it does affect everything, including government contract law. So I did have a lot of experience working on those kinds of issues for the Navy.
And Phil was the editor-in-chief of our International Law Journal. I like to think that that helped him get his first job. Sure, it's, we'll go with
It
that.
definitely did. I think anytime you have a leadership position in it's something to talk about in a job.
Right, and Kate, did you go straight into your career, or have you bounced a couple of times too?
No, I actually went straight into my career.
So tell us how you got that first job.
I got into the Department of Justice through the DOJ Honors Program. So
You could talk about it.
okay.
Which is really hard and impressive.
Thank you. It is quite hard to get in. There are several divisions within the Department of Justice that accept people straight out of law school, but the honors program is the only way to get into the Department of Justice right out of law school. Generally, we seek. Otherwise, you have to have at least 3-5 years of experience. But yeah, that's a whole process. The application is typically due before Labor Day each year when you're going into your 3rd year of law school. And I'm happy to talk about the DOJ Honors Program with anyone here who is interested in working for the Department of Justice after law school.
I mean, it's tough, but we always have students that get in through there. And so I definitely encourage you to think about that. And it's nice now that you know somebody who can help you with your application and give you advice. So that's great. Eliza, do you have a story about how you got your job?
Gonna sound really familiar because I essentially did the exact same thing as Kate. I applied to the DOJ honor program. Executive Office for Immigration Review at that time had a lot of postings available. I interned at an immigration court before came into law school knowing I wanted to do immigration. Figured I would do private practice or work for a nonprofit, and then stumbled across this internship opportunity. Loved it. Had a great time. Was convinced by my supervisors to apply to the DOJ honors program because I thought there's no way that's gonna work. But it did. And so, yeah, I got my placement through there. Did it. It's a 2-year placement to start. And then at least at our agency, they started offering permanent placements to folks who wanted to stay on. So I stayed, and yeah, I've been there 7 years now. So I hope I've liked it.
Right. So when Caitlin describes her job, I think everybody understands she's litigating. Your job sounds a little different. Can you describe it to the?
Clerking for the judges. So it's we're permanent attorney advisors at the immigration court. We draft decisions for the judges. We address legal issues, do a lot of legal research. We're kind of the monkeys behind the keyboards in the back office. So when you're in the immigration court, generally you're seeing folks who have been put in removal proceedings. So they're usually looking for some relief from removal. So we see a lot of asylum claims, a lot of claims under the Convention Against Torture, which is all the type of international law I was really interested in. So to get to do that kind of work every day is really exciting for me. And immigration law is dense, to say the least. It's not exactly the most intuitive law, which makes it exciting in the sense that you never have the answers to everything, which means you're always learning something. So it's a great job. If you want to apply for DOJ honors, still one of the best. I mean, the only route to take right out of law school to get into the DOJ. There are other opportunities now for lateral hires further down the line if you did want to kind of do what other folks have done, have a few jobs beforehand. But
So I know you're out there saying, wow, those jobs sound so exciting compared to those jobs I heard yesterday in the private international law panel. But do you guys make enough money to survive? Will you be honest and give us a sense of like what they pay in the public sector? Yeah,
our salary is public, so
Yeah.
Currently, GS 13 is going to the GS is a pay scale that they pay certain government federal employees on. And right now, I think it's at about 125K, which is not bad for
not bad.
international law. And in the public service, it's actually very well paid for that type of position.
And you get to live in Cleveland, which is cheaper than New York or DC. Yeah. Caitlin?
Yeah, so we are also on the GS pay scale. I'm at GS 15, but but in the Cleveland area, my salary is also public.
Can you just like throw that out there?
I think I make like around 160.
Okay. I just want you to know that's a lot of money in Cleveland. You can do just fine. Yeah. Now, before you were a judge, what do they pay people in the Navy?
So the
General counsel.
Yeah, the Navy General Counsel's Office is also on the GS scale. I'll say a couple things about salary more generally.
Yeah.
So it's all public. I think for new attorneys, it starts at about, I don't know the exact number now, and it depends on the location, but in the DC area, I think it's around $75,000. And I think the top of the scale now is just under $200,000.
191. Okay.
What I would say about the scale more generally is that if you're an attorney, you tend to get promoted up the GS scale pretty quickly. I know at the DOJ is they have a very promotion cycle, so you can expect to go up GS level.
And at state, we went up each year. At
Yeah.
GS level, so.
So that is a reasonable expectation. I will say though, at some point it does get sort of stagnant. So you will reach a point where you're not going to get.
Well,
paid.
you hit 15 and then you have to
Yeah.
do steps. And then you have to
Yes.
switch over to SES, which is like political or something.
Correct.
right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it doesn't come really more
Right.
pay.
Mm.
But, so there's that. The other thing I would say about pay for the federal government is there's other benefits like, student loan forgiveness. That's true of other public organizations too, but that can make a huge financial difference versus working at like a law firm or in the private sector. So if you do 10 years of public service, either in the federal government or somewhere else, you can sign up for a pay back program that's commensurate with your salary, and there's a percentage cap on how much you have to pay. And then after 10 years of service, and fine payments, all of your student loans go away. So that can be a huge financial difference.
Did you guys know about that program? A lot of you did already. Okay. But that's, I mean, I think it's really, really beneficial in the public sector. Now, Hyder, when you were not, when you were at Interpol, were you always still being paid through USAID, or did you become an Interpol employee?
So at first, when I was seconded, I was still on the GS pay scale and still technically a USAID employee. And from Interpol's perspective, an Interpol employee. But then when I went over as contracted official, no connection then to USAID.
How do they handle taxes?
Yeah, so you declare your income. I mean, it was under the host country agreement with France. I mean, there was like a small amount that was deducted from the salary of staff, but generally it was almost tax free.
Yeah, I mean, mostly when you work for an international organization abroad, you still have to declare your taxes and pay a tiny bit, but you're mostly tax-free. It's a big benefit. When you think taxes is like 50% of your income, that's a big benefit.
So the salary might not have been as high overall, but when you take into account that there was no taxes essentially, the healthcare was fully covered. We got a lot more time off. I was getting 2.5 days of annual leave every month as opposed to 6 and 12 hours when I was in the federal government. And it was unlimited sick leave if you needed that. So there were some other pretty significant benefits that made up for the financial one.
Yeah, and Chris, you've worked at a lot of international organizations. How does the pay scale compare, and can you tell us more about the taxes?
I think the UN tries to, they try to pay so at the top level of any national government. So I think the UN is very similar to the US government, Swiss government and others, and what they pay their staff. And there are different benefits. Great benefits around school fees, school education and reimbursement and things like that. People think that's sort of unfair, but you're expected when you're working for an international organization to move. Expected to go from duty station to duty station depending on the need. So if you have a family, your family has to travel and follow you. And so they have to also be in schools that where they can easily move and the curriculums are easily transferable, and that's why they a lot tend to go to it. They do help you with that. On salaries, yeah, pretty. I mean, on the taxes, they're all a bit different when they have different arrangements. The UN will, you still file your taxes in less because the US will tax you anywhere in the world, and no matter where you work, and it's actually the only country in the general UN system that actually taxed its employees still. And then the UN would offset, would reimburse you. Now the UN is unique. Other organizations don't do that. Some do. Some of them, so you'll have tax exemption in the country where you're working. I have tax exemption in Switzerland, but I pay taxes in the US. I usually less because you're overseas and you have a foreign earned income.
Okay, so I think your jobs by their titles all sound really sexy, but let's go down the list and tell us the most exciting thing you ever worked on, just to give them a sense of the kinds of things that make public international law so fun. Lisa?
It's a torture side.
Pretty exciting. I mean, that's, day to day. I think for me, the most exciting cases are the ones where I get to get a bit more creative in terms of doing legal analysis, that, more so on the cutting edge of what is allowable within our circuit. So immigration, every circuit does things a bit differently. It's a very strange system. It can end up in a lot of different precedents in different parts of the country. And so Sixth Circuit, we have our own precedent. And Sixth Circuit does some things very different from some other places. So for me, some of my favorite cases have been ones where I get to go to the judge with a case that they really want to grant, but thought there's no way. There's just, the law just won't allow it. Yeah, we've denied so many ones that are just like this. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I think if we look at this case that just came out of the Sixth Circuit, there's like a through line there, because at the end of the day, if someone is eligible for relief, then it is our job to grant it. So that's one of my favorite parts of my job, is being able to step in and give my perspective on a legal issue, have a judge listen to it, and potentially be able to.
And Caitlin, you've been up and down the court system. What was the most exciting
Yeah,
case you did?
There are two on my mind. I won't go through both, but there's this. I love trials. That's why I wanted to be a trial attorney. So I think the trial is more significant. But a close runner-up was my first oral argument before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on a case that kind of changed the trajectory of how USCIS adjudicates special immigrant juvenile petitions. But going back to, I think what was kind of the highlight of my career so far was being part of the trial team for Doe versus Mayorkas in the District of Arizona. That was a huge case. It was a 2-week trial. We had high-level officials from CBP testifying, and that is the case that set the floor for what the Constitution requires in Border Patrol facilities. So that was kind of a really big case. We lost, not too badly, but the government did lose. But again, that was the case where the judge had to decide, what does the Constitution require that Border Patrol provide to individuals who are in its custody? And so that was a really interesting case to be part of, because there was no precedent for it.
Right, and I should do a little advertisement. So Judge Haji is now a professor here, teaching in his spare time, teaching basically it's government contracts, which is international procurement is another way of thinking about it. So there is an international aspect to that. And there's a lot of money to be made in that area as well. But tell us the most exciting thing that you had in your career.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. So I'm a government contracts geek, I guess you could say. So, and I do like litigation a lot. So my favorite experience is probably doing a very big protest. It's a procedure in which you challenge the award of a government contract. Basically, the losers of the competition can file suit against the United States. So that was my favorite experience. I mean, it was a huge contract. It was worth like $800 million or something like that. So that was my favorite thing I've done. But I think to most people that aren't like that into litigation and aren't that into government contract litigation specifically, would find most interesting the time that I worked in what's called the Navy Acquisition Integrity Office, which is the office within the Navy that deals with non-responsible government contractors around the world. And you may be familiar with the story of someone called Fat Leonard, who is a notorious fraudster, defrauded the U.S. government out of millions and millions of dollars. He's a Malaysian. A Washington Post reporter named Craig Whitlock did a whole book on him. I'm sure it'll be a movie someday. But I worked in an office that dealt with him and people like him, and traveled to sort of deal with finding ways to get the sort of goods and services that he was providing to the Navy from other sources. So I think that part of my career and working on those kinds of issues was probably the most interesting thing I did, but it wasn't really one matter. It was sort of a collection of things related to that office.
And Hyder, I know when you were at USAID, you were in a section called crisis management, right? Something like that. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. What do you have as your, favorite moment from your career?
Well, if I can actually talk about something that I'm working on now, and it's very exciting. In fact, it has nothing to do with international civil service law. It's actually international sports law. So I have one case where I'm representing a national champion wrestler who is a woman and a devout Muslim. She always competes in a particular uniform by which she's fully covered and the uniform is loose fitting. And she had qualified for the Olympic team trials several months ago and had a chance to actually compete in the Olympics. The day before the Olympic team trials, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee told her that she would have to wear the standard uniform, which is something she can't do without violating her religion. So literally the day before the Olympic team trials, we had something of a hearing, which was, to be honest, just a sham. But anyway, we're now filing our appeal because there's the next quadrennium coming, which is starting now for 4 years from now for Los Angeles. So within the next few days, we'll be filing that appeal with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And I'd say that's the most exciting case for me.
It's amazing. I think we're all learning from this summer Olympic how much law is involved in the Olympics. And I'm speaking about the gymnasts controversy. But let's now go to Aaron at the State Department or elsewhere. What was the most exciting thing that you got to work on?
Have a tie-in to what Harvard did. So one of the really cool things I'm working on right now is policy around the kinds of visas that are required for people that are coming to the World Cup in 26 and then the LA Olympics in 28. There are so many different occupations and different activities that people are traveling to the US for. And if you're not from a visa waiver country, you need a visa. And so there are obviously athletes, there are referees, there are, their entourages, coaches, so many different people, including tourists. And we don't want to keep out everybody, we need these tourists to come. So that's a really challenging area that I'm working on. But I would say my favorite is probably being one of the primary drafters of legislation that was actually passed last year in the what's called the NDAA. I'm trying to remember exactly what that's, National Defense Authorization Act. Okay, for fiscal year 24. And that legislation was passed, and what it did was it provided visas for US government employees who work at embassies and consulates overseas. You may not know this, but most of the State Department's employees are actually employees from other countries working at our posts overseas. And if you work for a certain number of years, you are eligible for an immigrant visa. That means you can move to the US and work here permanently. Through a series of events, visas were no longer available. And so we drafted legislation, sent it off to our contacts on the Hill. Somebody picked it up, it got passed, and then Secretary Blinken invited a very small team of us to celebrate. And that was really fun.
That's great. All right. So Chris Rossi, we had a profile about some of the exciting things you did in our In Brief alumni magazine. And it starts off by saying, whenever there's an international crisis, they throw Chris Rossi at it. Chris, tell us about at least one of them.
They don't do that anymore, but no, I certainly stay around. Yeah, so I mean, I look at crises now probably not from a legal lens, really. I mean, when you're a lawyer, you're always a lawyer. You don't really ever take off your legal hat. But day to day, I'm not in a legal role. I'm more in a senior management and leadership and policy role. I oversee the legal team, so I have a lot of interaction with the legal team. But try not to do it myself, or let them, and let them do it. What I do is I've done different things. I headed our operations in some countries in Southeast Asia before, so I had a very geographically specific focus. So when there was the Lombok earthquake in 2018, I started our operation to bring relief after the big earthquake, the first of the three major disasters that happened in Indonesia in a few-month period. When COVID struck, when I was based in Thailand, when COVID became a international concern, And we were the first, Thailand was the first country outside of China that had confirmed COVID cases. And so we were started quickly to really to start a major operation in Southeast Asia, where the rest of the world was really aware of what was going to happen. And so started putting, health measures in place, offering health support in different countries, mobilizing health volunteers all over. And otherwise, I mean, now in my more general chief of staff role, I'm sort of in the middle of all major controversies that impact the organization. In July, I made my first visit ever. I'd never gone before to Afghanistan to have talks in Afghanistan on how to continue to provide humanitarian aid in the country. How the Red Cross and Red Crescent can continue access and unimpeded access, and also so we could ensure that that we could provide aid in an impartial manner, which is very important for the Red Cross and Red Crescent. We can't be told who to provide aid to and who not to provide aid to, based on any imposed criteria by any authorities or any non-state actors or anyone else. So, so it's those, and I was just in New York most of this week for United Nations General Assembly and the high-level segment, and having discussions on a range of very sensitive topics that have to do with, again, access and protection, which was our big focus of the week, protection of humanitarian workers. I was going to be there, but that's all. I'll focus.
How many of you are coming to the dinner tonight at the Brown Stadium?
So you'll hear. So I won't ruin my dinner speech. But my speech tonight will not be on. Tomorrow we have a conference on the law, on the technical aspects, right? On looking at what needs to change. And I see the dinner speech before the conference as really sort of a high-level overview and try to get you interested in the topic and why it's important on the ground today and why I see it as very important. So I won't say too much about that, but that's another big area that I work on.
All right, that's fantastic. Now I want to save time for your questions, but there is one last question I want to ask at least a couple of you, and that is, what tips do you have for our students about how to get a job in public international law? So what's your couple of tips that you think they should know that you've learned? Erin?
I can start. I say this every time I speak on this panel, is get the best grades that you can possibly get. Grades
Seems
will
self-evident,
always,
but good thing.
they will always matter. It still matters at the State Department, regardless of what level you're at. State is very interested in your transcript. And so that's always my advice is, don't jerk around in law school, get good grades.
Okay, other good advice that you all have. Lisa?
Say internships and clinics, for sure. If you know there's something you're interested in or want to try out, law school is the perfect time to do it. I did the Interpol internship during law school, loved it, never regretted taking that time out and going abroad and just trying that out for a while. The court internship I did obviously ended up being my career, and you never know what is going to turn into something you end up loving. So I think as many of them as you can do, I would suggest going for them.
Yeah, and I do want to say, if you're interested in asylum and refugee, so human rights work, immigration law is probably the best place to do it domestically. And we have now an endowed, you know about our endowment? So the Fragaman family gave us an endowment for our immigration law clinic. So we have now an endowed professor, and we have a number of students every semester that do these. They get to actually argue cases before your courts. Did either of you do the immigration law clinic?
We ended up going abroad instead of doing that, but that's
Okay.
one of the things I regretted later.
You did that? Okay, yeah, so that's something to take advantage of. Other tips?
I would just add onto that. So the internship experiences that this law school offers are phenomenal. One thing that I would also suggest is once it's over, to keep in touch with some of the people whom you worked with over the summer. That could also turn into something. In my case, I had spent a few months at Interpol, and then I left and came back to the US. And then it wasn't until 5-6 years later that there was another opportunity. And because I knew someone there, Yaron, I was able to go back to Interpol. I had kept in touch with him once every so often. I'd send him an email just to let him know what I was doing. And so when I wrote to him 6 years later, it wasn't as some stranger saying, might show up one day, but it was someone he knew and was familiar with. So that then helped me get back to Interpol. So it wasn't necessarily something that translated into a job the next day, but even years later, it can certainly help.
Yeah, and you guys are going to hear a lot about networking. That's a big part of being a successful lawyer. This is your exhibit A. That's a great story about networking. We want to hear your questions. So what kinds of questions do you have for these folks about how you can get a job in public international law? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering how many of you, if any, speak another language and how important that has been to your job experience? Because I never had the opportunity to learn another language. I went to a very underprivileged high school, university, everything like that. And so I'm wondering like if that's a barrier, if I should start learning another language now.
And I'll tell you, I stink at foreign languages and I still had a pretty good career in international law, but some of these folks speak really well in foreign languages. Spanish, right?
Yes, but maybe I can help alleviate some of those fears. If at the Department of Justice, and I think at most government agencies, foreign language is not required. Anytime we're doing anything that involves, whenever someone is, whether it's depositions or at a trial or there are documents, we always have translators and interpreters. So foreign language is absolutely not necessary. I do speak Spanish, and I have never had to use it at my job, except for like talking to colleagues for fun.
And then, oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Well, and along the same lines, when I was working at the Department of Commerce on international trade matters, I got put on the Korea Free Trade Agreement team. And my background is Korean. I speak a little bit of Korean, but I would say it's more like, where do I go for this, or what is in the fridge, that kind of stuff. But so I went to my boss after he put me on the team and I said, I need you to know that I don't speak that level of Korean. And he laughed so hard and he said, oh my gosh, we do all of this in English. The Koreans, they speak English. So it's never been a hindrance for me. But I was terrified that I thought he put me on the team because I speak Korean. But
Now Chris does speak fluent French. Have you used that in your career? Yeah.
And I don't think it doesn't block you if you don't have a second language. But I have a lot of colleagues that have 3 or 4 of the official working languages. I have others that speak other languages. And if you want to move to, there are some places if you want to be abroad, we will look for people that can at least work in that language. We won't send anyone now to the Americas at a senior level if they can't speak Spanish. It doesn't make any sense to be sort of head of delegation in Argentina or in Bolivia, or it isn't for us. We really need, or we'll send you if you really want to do it and you show commitment. We'll send you for sort of a really intensive course right before it's actually to have a refresher.
So you were head of delegation in Thailand. Is that what?
So I didn't have to learn. So none of the countries were. Indonesia, East Timor, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. I never English was fine. But now, in my job, I'm one of 5 members of the senior leadership team, and I'm probably the only one that speaks French. And so it's made me very valuable to when the senior. Someone to actually go into a meeting and speak French, or to speak in French, or to go to a high-level meeting in French. So I think that helped me quite a bit. And I'd say when we hire any of our international staff now, we do have the requirement for fluency in English for no matter where you are, but also it's preferred if you have one of the other official languages, English, French, or Arabic. English, French, Spanish, or Arabic. And the other 2 of our official languages and our working languages are Russian and Chinese. Well, but they're not. It's not required. But if you have one of the others, it puts you definitely. It gives you puts you sort of above others. And in the UN, I'd say it's exactly the same as the UN.
So I'm just curious because I know a lot of you do speak foreign languages. How many of you speak Spanish? Okay, and the French and Arabic. All right. Well, 2 of the 3, a couple of them. Yeah.
I finally started learning Arabic now, so that's my. I thought that was useful.
All right, great question. Another question out there? Yes.
Could you guys talk a little bit for both, if you've worked in both public and private, like the work-life balance between them, like
Such a good question.
especially with
Alright, so-
international and your.
Yeah.
Can I say something before she answers? So you've touched a nerve with me personally, because I feel like students that are interviewing often ask this question during interviews.
Oh, and they should not ask
And
that
yes,
during an interview,
And I think it's a perfectly reasonable concern to think about.
but not that.
But yes, please don't ask someone when you're interviewing about work-life balance. It's just gonna come across like you're not committed to the job.
That's right.
And I've heard a lot of students try to cleverly ask the question, and it's very transparent what they're doing. So I think it's something that you need to talk to people about and figure out what you expect.
When
of
I
the
was
job.
dean, I would spend a lot of time with the managing partners of the law firms, and a managing partner at a very large law firm in Cleveland said, "You've got to tell your students to stop asking that question." And they basically said, "Look, that's not what we're all about." I mean, it's hard work at a big law firm, and they don't want to think that people are coming in that are less than fully committed. So that's a good thing. But your question is right. There's a big difference, I think, between different jobs and how much you're expected, how much free time and travel time you have. And does anybody want to talk about that? I know you guys all work really hard. You don't have any free time, but
That's true. But, I mean, I think, maybe in my position now, really a lot of people that I manage, so maybe I have, so maybe I spend more time working now than I did when I started off in the international public sector. But having just visiting my colleagues who are in non-family duty stations in difficult locations, who work 7 days a week. Because what else are they gonna do when they're in a country they can't go outside? They work really, really hard, and when they get their manager, it's time for them to have their rest and relaxation period. That's when they can take a little break. But I can tell you, and they work harder than anyone I've ever seen in the private sector. And I think that if you approach it as I'll go to the public sector because it's less work, you just that's fine. Maybe you'll manage to stay at a level and you'll stay employed for long enough, but you probably won't move up, and you definitely won't show the commitment that you need if you want to career. So I would say, don't think that you're going to go in and you have to, but don't look at it as public sector is any less of a commitment than the private. I would say if you're in it for the money, I would say in the private sector because it does overall. It does offer and work way up, become a partner. Or you probably make better.
and one of the big differences I think between private and public is you get a lot more responsibility early in your career in the public international law jobs, but with responsibility comes a lot of work. So it is a misnomer to think that public is going to be less work, but it is, more responsibility, more excitement. Yeah.
Say, this is the flip side to that. One of the things that we do brag about is in theory, you can do our jobs with great work-life balance. I'm not particularly good at it, but people do it because it is a government job. You're paid salary to be there a very certain number of hours, and you're expected to be able to finish your work within those hours, not in like an onerous way, but in that it is enough time in theory to finish your work. And there are people who, do it, are people who they clock out at exactly 5 p.m. They have their weekends free. We're not allowed to take our work away with us if we go on vacation. We are actually not allowed to do any work, which is great, unlike I think some private firms where you can expect calls while you're on the beach somewhere. So I think you take somewhat of a pay cut compared to what you might get in the private sector for similar work. But at least for my job, one of the benefits is, especially for folks who want to have more of that balance, they're able to do work they love while also having a life outside of work. So.
And I know Kate and Aaron and Chris, you all have kids and you've made that work.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it depends where you work in the government. I can say, having bounced around at different places, the culture is different at every agency. At the State Department, we are always in crisis mode. And so when, Afghanistan, everything surrounding that happened in 2021, for very long stretches, I was working till 1 a.m. every day for weeks. And I do have 3 children, but somehow we survived that period. But Israel, Gaza, we're watching Lebanon because there are people all over the world, Haiti, as well. People all over the world who need to get out, and people who have US citizens who have family members who can get visas to come to the US. So we're always in crisis mode. I think that people at the State Department who clock out, I've actually never seen that. I'm thinking about the attorneys in the legal advisor's office. I don't think I've ever seen anybody clock out at 5. It's just not part of the culture at the State Department. But the work is very exciting. It's very fun. It's really cool to be on the inside and see how the sausage is made and working on high profile matters. So I think that there is a trade-off. It's not like that all the time, but I would say that we are not the best at achieving work-life balance at the State Department.
I think I would agree with everything Erin said. It really depends on what agency you're in. I will say, I think the government is a little bit, it's more generous in its leave policy, and a lot of matters are so sensitive, you can't bring your computer with you if you're, especially if you're traveling abroad. So that's been nice. I know my office has been incredibly generous with me. I work from home. I have a son with special needs. They've been really accommodating with my work schedule so that I can take him to therapies, and uh, so I've had a really good experience. A few years ago, before I had kids, I was taking on a lot of work. I was involved in a lot of big cases, and I was easily working 55 hours a week, but that was by my own choice. I liked it and I wanted that work. And when I took a step back, they were willing to um, let me work on different things that didn't require as much travel and as many sleepless nights. So it's been good.
Want to add anything else, Chris? No?
No, I think it's,
All right. By the way, do any of you know Shalane and Rob Bliss? So one of the tracks at the State Department is not in the legal advisor's office, but it's the Foreign Service. And it turns out that about half the Foreign Service officers are lawyers, but they just go into the Foreign Service. We have 2 that have risen way up and have had a whole lot of interesting positions. But the other thing is they've had a lot of kids. And they just, every time they have a new position, they've been to China, they've been to Cuba. I think they're in Nepal now. They just have bigger families. And I see their pictures in
And
Facebook.
I'd say that people who are very experienced foreign service officers understand. That was actually going to be my last point.
Go
That
ahead.
people should look into the foreign service. It was not on my radar. I wish it was when I was in law school. But if you're a more experienced foreign service officer, you know that going to places like Nepal or the Philippines or Thailand they're great places to be when you have children because childcare and help is very, very cheap. And so a lot of foreign service officers have a lot of household help. They will have a nanny, they'll have a chef, they'll have a driver. And it's all above board and they can afford that. So it's actually a really great place to be if you.
I visited Chris in Arusha, Tanzania when he was working at the Rwanda Tribunal, and I think he had some of those helpers too, right? And in Bangkok, yeah.
Visit see there as well, and you definitely have a good life. Good.
And I will say, when Chris's kids were a little bit younger, his daughter had this British accent, and I'm like, look, your wife, Kate, is from Australia, you're from Canada, where's the British accent coming from? And I think it was the nanny had a British accent. And
In school.
or school, yeah, that's right. I thought that was fun. All right, we have time for one last question. Does someone have one for our great panel here? Yes.
Like phrase it properly. But I know a lot of you guys work like with humanitarian crises and certain regions, especially. Obviously, you guys were lawyers or you had like JD. How do you maintain like being impartial and neutral while interacting with certain hot topic issues? Because I know obviously you have your own passions, but then you have to be impartial. Like, how do you do that? What do you tell yourself?
mean,
I
yeah, go
think
ahead,
it's-
Aaron.
It's actually quite easy if, you know, you can just say that you're a lawyer, this is the law. I've been through many different administrations, a lot of transitions, and as a civil servant, our job is to just apply the law and advise on the law. And so, not being a political appointee, I don't have to kind of get into these gray, tricky areas of navigating my political beliefs versus, you know, what the administration wants. We just, you know, go straight down the line and say what the law is.
So I know Chris was in Africa during Ebola crisis, is that right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I visited.
So there was some like difficult politics involved in that. And then Venezuela, when they tried to throw out the Red Cross, is that a recent Nicaragua? Yeah, so I mean, you've got to be a diplomat as well as a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think my work again now is more diplomatic than legal. I know obviously feelings, and even, you know, I watch current crises today and say, you know, and countries that where I feel closer to because of my ancestry or friends and relatives living there. But you have to put that aside, right? And I have to, you know, and I also have jobs that I had when I was a lawyer that probably make me feel differently about parties to a conflict today, right? But I have to put all that aside and know that in my job, you know, this is what my organization stands for, and if I want to, and I'm going to uphold that. And if it gets to the point when I can't anymore, then it's you have to believe in my case, I believe in the fundamental principle. Political solutions to political problems, and my job is not to get involved in them. My job is to deal with the humanitarian issues and humanitarian concerns.
All right, so let me just sum up before we applaud our wonderful panelists, and that is public international law is a strength of the law school. It usually starts with an internship, so apply for those internships. The pay is pretty good, surprisingly, so don't be worried about that. If you don't speak a foreign language, it's okay because international law is mostly governed in English. And if you are applying for any legal job, don't ask about work-life balance. So let me ask you to join me in a great round of applause for the panelists.